So I've gone ahead and done a very quick pass in just making the thing look a little bit better, just getting some block colors in there and that kind of stuff sorted. Now the next thing I'm going to be showing you is going to be the actual decals. And we're doing this because at the moment we have a reasonably blocked frame. You can see that we have a reasonably blocked out frame. We have, well, it's just an environment that could look a lot better. So let's start kind of getting some arrows in there and some symbols, some logos, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to import two textures we have. I'm going to import Decal Pack 1 and Decal Pack 2 textures. Now these are textures I've made ahead of time, and I'm going to show you how they're set up. They might look a little bit ugly at first, but I'll explain what's going on. If I open up Decal Pack 1, we have this. But if I look at what's going on here and I turn off the channels, the red layer looks like this. The green layer like this. The blue layer like this. The other thing I can do here, if I want to try and improve them just a little bit, is I can go down and tell these to be masks, so they know that they should be set up in that way. So these are all packed into a single texture where red, green, and blue signify different images, and I've done the same thing for a second set for Decal Pack 2, which is just here. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to create a new material that's just going to be called m_basic decal. And we're going to instance this for other things, but for the time being, basic decal is literally going to be a texture. So I'm going to hold down T and left click. I'm then going to set Decal Pack 1 as my texture. Now we're going to need some way to select which of these colors we want to use. The easiest way for us to do that is to use a component mask param. So if I drag this in, and this comes into here, this parameter lets us choose red, green, or blue from a texture. So in this situation, I'm just going to have this selecting the red channel, and I'm going to call this decal channel, so we can change this to whatever we want. And the other thing that I'm going to do is hold down V, and I'm going to have a decal color. And this by default is going to be, let's go with something that's slightly, oh actually the blue could look nice. Let's just go for that for the minute. And how this is going to work is this is going to set the opacity of my decal, and this is going to set the color of my decal. So to set this up as a decal, what I need to do is I need to set this to be a deferred decal just here. And you'll see that when I do, if I go base color and I plug you into the opacity channel, I now also need to set the blend mode to be a debuffer translucent color. Now at the moment what we have is a slight issue where it's not going to work because opaque needs to be changed over to translucent. So it needs to know that it actually is a translucent material. And you can see that we've got this now appearing over here. So if I were to hit apply, save, and just quickly test this asset, what I would see would be this. If I got this, and I added a deferred decal into the map, and I set the material to be equal to my basic decal, you can see now that we can paste things in. Now this is a reasonably low res image that I've used for my decals. It's just a 512 by 512. So we could up the quality here if we want to get something a bit more substantial. In this situation, the more I look at it, the more I think that it would be a good idea as well for us to use a white as a basic color instead of a blue or anything like that. So I'm just going to go out and set this to 111 so we have a white standardized texture. Good. And the other thing that I'm going to do to kind of just clean it up a little bit is at the moment you can see that there's some artifacting going on from the texture itself. And there's different ways that we could clean this up, but the easiest way for us to do it is because we're using a hard mask for every single one of these textures, it means that we don't really need to care about any gray values. So what I can do here to kind of clean it up is I can run a power and plug that into the opacity channel here and just crank the power up to like 4, and you'll notice that it should start getting rid of some of the jaggies along the edge. Now the alternative to me doing this is to multiply by a small number first, say 1.5, and then clamping that at the end. So essentially what we're doing here is if any values are very gray, so they're very close to being the right color, it's going to grab them and push them up so that they're all there. I'll show you what that looks like. And then when we power it, it's going to then make anything that's below white darker, and the clamp is then going to just clamp it off this way. Now this still has some issues with it, and ultimately at the end of the day the better solution is to actually set these textures up as a higher resolution if we want to try and save memory, but this will do for the time being. So we've got our first very simple decal in, but how do we make the others? That's rather simple. I'm going to create an instance, and I'm actually going to make a couple of these, including one that's actually just a blank instance, purely for us to have something to work with here. So it's going to be called mdecal underscore straight arrows. It's going to be the first one. And this is actually just going to have these options enabled, but not changed. I'm doing this so that if we ever modify the base, I still have one for the arrows. So I'm going to change this basic decal to be straight arrows instead, and you'll see no change whatsoever. So this one here, I'm going to put here, and I want to set this up to be, at the moment it's at negative 220, so if I were to drag this and just change it to 220, you'll see that we have this nicely set up. Somehow this isn't quite at the same point, so I'm just going to move this over a little bit, just so it's a little better balanced. Cool, so we've got that set up now. We've just got some basic arrows kind of pointing down. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to make this new one called decal underscore curved arrows. And if I double click on that, I can now change this channel to be a different one. If I want to see this a bit better, I can make this a box. So at the moment, this value is equal to the red channel, but if I swap this over to be the green channel, we get that instead. So save. And now again, if I want to drop in a deferred decal somewhere while that's selected, I'm able to kind of place in some nice little arrows. It's always the last one you check. There we go. So I've now got some base little arrows there. Now be aware that these will project onto everything. So if you look here, you can see that this is actually projecting onto these surfaces as well. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't, but the easiest way to fix it is to just simply change the scaling along that axis. So if I hit spacebar twice, I can see that the axis that's up and down is this red one. So if I change that to 0.2, it's now only going to be painting stuff in that region. So the decal is only going to be projected in a very thin area. So again, I'm going to go here, 0.2. And I'm going to do it for these as well, because the other thing that they will decal right now is if the ball were to go over them, they would actually spray onto the ball dynamically. So that looks alright. It might be a good idea for me to tweak things off, but this is good for the minute so you can kind of get an idea as to how it looks. I'm now going to create another one, so once again I'm going to duplicate, and this is going to be duplicated to be equal to the edge, just kind of like a generic tech edge piece. So this is going to be equal to the blue channel. Save. And if I drag in a decal, you can see that we've now got that tech edge kind of going on up there. So this is rather simple. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to bring this across, and once again, so you can see there that it's projecting onto all of the assets here. So the spline mesh is getting it as well. Can right click here, and I'm just going to mirror it on this, mirroring on the local Z, which is timesing this one by -1. And I'm just going to make sure this is kind of nice and tucked away into the corner, just for it to balance the others. It's good enough for the minute. I'm going to set this to be 0.2, as we've been doing. So we're starting to get some general tech kind of look going on. I'm going to duplicate this one and make it the generic stripes. So this is the decal underscore, I'm just going to call it stripes. Now, at the moment this is actually missing a parameter. What I haven't done is I haven't set the texture parameter that feeds in the texture as a parameterized section. So I'm going to go back to the basic decal, and I'm going to right click on this and convert it to a parameter. And I'm just going to set the parameter name to be equal to decal map. I'm going to save that. And then if I go back to stripes, I can see the decal map is now an option, and I'm going to set it from 1 over to 2. So I'm going to save this, and I can now drag that in to have kind of like a warning area that I can use as my as the decal down below. So I'm going to get my deferred decal, drag it in, and I'm just going to quickly set this up to be along this bottom row. I don't mind condensing these lines down a bit because I think it still looks okay. So I just want to kind of put that there. Zero it off so it's in the middle. And I'm just going to set this up to have a little bit of a gap. Final setting is going to be making sure that the x-axis is zeroed out to much smaller. Much smaller. So just quickly setting that up so we've got something to work with. Now the next thing that we're going to be going into is a slightly more advanced form of decal. So come into the next lesson and I'll show you how to do debuffer decals that actually change certain parameters beyond the color.